Okay, now we're going to move into a section of our studies about organizational processes, structures, and designs. We're moving out of the individual and group and moving more to organizational level of discussion. So this is chapter 13, where we define job design. We look at how in the process of job design we can improve the work-family balance. We can look at alternative design approaches that organizations can use to improve job performance. We can look at different factors and relationships that link job design and job performance. We can compare job enrichment, job enlargement strategies, and we can identify specific differences that account for different perceptions of the job content. One of the key factors in job design these days is looking at work-life balance, and many U.S. companies are trying to experiment with designing work and benefits to encourage employees to balance their home and work lives. When we look at job design, we are defining that by jobs being the building blocks of organizational design. When we look at the process by which managers decide individual jobs and authority, and the job design itself is a major cause of how effective a person is in their job performance. When we look at job design, we look at what employees are expected to do and how they're expected to do it. It's a very dynamic and ongoing process. So even once we have a job description, it may change and morph depending on the worker as well. Issues associated with job design and quality of work life that we consider tend to be economic issues, political issues within the organization, monetary, how much we pay people for certain types of jobs, the social factors, who they relate with, what kind of work groups, psychological factors in terms of their need for achievement, affiliation, and physical factors, that the environment is safe and comfortable for them. In designing jobs to increase our quality of work life, it's a philosophy of management that the quality of work life should enhance the dignity of all workers, and it should help change the organizational culture for the better, and it should improve physical and emotional well-being of employees. The movement of quality of work life was based on some of the 50s, 60s, and 70s when we had the human relations came into organizational design, and we started seeing more emphasis on job enrichment and job enlargement. When we look at designing jobs, some of the indicators that we have a good quality of work life, some of the ways that we measure that is that we have fewer accidents, fewer people calling in sick and using it, that we have a reduction in employee turnover, and that we have a reduction of grievances filed. There's still research about the trade-offs between, when we look at quality of work life, are we gaining in human terms? Are we improving productivity and quality in the organization by having a more vital workforce? There's some different beliefs that's causing organizations these days because of the economic situations to sacrifice some quality of work-life design efforts in order to be more competitive in the global economy. And the competition presents some opportunities to be able to combine quality of work life with some of the reindustrialization. In terms of job design, it attempts to identify the most important needs of the employees and the organization. And when we have effective job design, we should be removing obstacles that make it difficult for an employee to accomplish their job and frustrate their satisfaction of their needs. In terms of a work-family balance in job design, there's more attention from organizations directed towards with resources towards helping employees balance those work and family needs and trying to accommodate by offering more flexible work arrangements, which we will be talking about. The benefits to the company when they can advertise and recruit a higher level of employee is when they have a good quality of work-life program and a balance of flexible work stuff, is they can recruit and have better retention rates, that they have higher morale in their organization, that we're always talking about reducing absenteeism and turnover, and we have a more productive workforce when they feel like there's a good work-life balance and proper job design. What we're seeing that's driving this effort in organizations is, again, more and more women and single parents are in the workforce. They have different needs. There's more and more dual career couples. We have a population that's aging with the baby boomers, and they have different kinds of needs. in terms of how they balance work life. We're seeing some kinds of more programs in job sharing, more flex time, people working from home and telecommuting. As you can see from this chart, on the darker green ones show you some of the many factors such as technological, social, human factors and so forth around looking at the job, how it's designed, and then how they actually can perform that job. When we look at performance outcomes, we can measure our outcomes quantitatively by the quantity of work, the quality of work. We can look at absenteeism rates, tardiness rates, turnover rates. There's also implicit and explicit standards within jobs too. In terms of personal behavior outcomes, in terms of the work, what we'll see from workers when we have a good balance of quality of work life is that they attend work regularly. They stay with the job instead of quitting. They tend to stay healthy, and they're good, mentally and emotionally. And we have reduced accidents and occupational related problems. Intrinsic factors tend to come from within the worker, that they're satisfied with their job. Extrinsic tends to be that there's objects or events that follow the worker's efforts, and factors or persons that are not necessarily directed towards the job, and that could contribute to their job outcome. The job satisfaction depends on a combination of these intrinsic and extrinsic factors, and how the person holding the job actually perceives these particular the relevance of these particular outcomes. When we look at job design, then we also need to look at job analysis. And probably in your work situations, you'll probably be involved with job analysis a lot more than you'll be involved with job design, because you'll probably come into organizations that already exist and jobs have been designed. So in job analysis, it tends to be more ongoing and looking at objective descriptions of the job itself and how well it's being executed. In job analysis, information is gathered that looks at content, some of the requirements, and the context of the job. The job content refers to the activities required of the job, and then when we do what's called an FJA, functional job analysis, it describes the content in terms of what does that worker do, in terms of what kind of information they work with, what people they interact with, what their jobs they can do, the methods and techniques, the machines and equipment, the materials, all of that has to do with a functional job analysis. When we look at job requirements, we look at, when we're recruiting people for jobs, we look at their educational level, their experience, if they need to be licensed for particular types of jobs, and some of the personal characteristics that they need to have in terms of being able to get along with others and perform the job in terms of being able to handle stress or to work well with others. Oftentimes we'll see organizations administer or pay attention to what's called a position analysis questionnaire. And this questionnaire takes into account all the different human characteristics from tasks, technology, jobs, and jobs classes. When you take human resource management, you'll talk a little bit more about job analysis and how they classify jobs and pay structures. The position analysis questionnaire also identifies and analyzes jobs from how the information's processed, how decisions are made, the relationships in the organizations, the working conditions, the physical activity, and skills required to do the job. Moving along to job context, we look at the environment which the job needs to be performed. And this includes things like, what are the physical demands, how accountable is the person within that job, what are the consequences if they make a mistake, and how much supervision do they need. When we see different settings, we have factory jobs, and oftentimes in factory jobs, we can look at Frederick Taylor, who really kind of pioneered the whole idea of time and motion studies, where he actually he used scientific methods to actually analyze, people's efforts that they put into the job and the outcome. So they scientifically selected, trained, and developed people, and they divided work equally between the management and workmen. In office jobs, which is a different setting, it is one of our fastest growing sectors in the U.S. in particular, since we have more industrialization taking place offshore. We have more jobs going on and this is mostly due to a lot of technological breakthrough. Different human factors are now being given different attention. And we have a tendency in the U.S. to emphasize more on the area of technology. When we look at job analysis, we look at the range that the job has, how deep the job is in terms of their skills, and the relationships that are developed within the context of that job. When we talk about range, we're looking at how many tasks the person's expected to perform. If someone has a greater range of tasks, chances are they'll probably get a greater reward associated with that. Or how deep it is, how many activities are associated with it, and the outcomes. And we can look at this. They made a little chart for you to look at in the book to say, well, when you have really high job range and high job depth, that you'll see people that tend to be, pretty senior people in organizations that have a lot of flexibility and versatility in terms of being able to execute their job. College presidents, hospital chiefs, business researchers, and so forth. In terms of the results of job analysis, the job relationships are determined by the manager's decisions regarding what kind of departments there are and what kind of degree of control that certain leaders or managers might have, and that would indicate how people interact with each other in that span of control of managers, like whether they manage 7 people or 25 people. The larger the group, the harder it is for people to establish friendships and interest relationships. A basis for departmentalization and the impact on job relationships is when we have a functional basis, we put jobs with similar depth and range in the same groups. When we have product and territory and customers, we place people in jobs that have dissimilar depth and range in the same group. And we'll talk about that later when we talk about organizational design. When we look at perceived job content, we look at different job activities and general job characteristics as they're perceived by people. We might have 2 people doing the same job who may have the same or different perceptions of the job, and that could be their difference in perception of how happy they are in the job or how not, or how challenged they are. And again, we'll go back to some of our motivational theories. To increase job performance, we would probably change the design of the job, or look at their individual perceptions and the social settings to see if there's something that might be done to motivate the employee more. Some of the things involved with job content has to do, and we'll look at the work model next, but the variety of the job, how autonomous the employee is, how much they identify with the task that they're doing, how much feedback they get from their supervisors and colleagues, and how able they are to develop friendships with themselves and among themselves and other people. So the perception of the task variety is affected by the individual differences in terms of their need strengths. So employees that have really not very strong higher order needs, like we talked about in Maslow, where they want growth, achievement, and so forth, they're less concerned with performing a lot of varieties of tasks. You don't need to worry as much about making jobs really challenging and stimulating. They just want to get the job done and get their paycheck. Even in individuals with strong growth needs, they can't continue to respond over and over when you continually apply because you're trying to do growth needs for them. You can't overstimulate them. They'll also burn out. And performance will turn down will reduce as individuals start to reach their limits of their abilities and time capability. In terms of social settings, they're affected by the perceptions of the job content. So we might have leadership styles and what people say about the job, like, oh, you got that job? Gee, that's too bad. Or, wow, I wish I could get that job. And people will have a different perception based on some of the social interactions that are involved. One of the things that we can do to help make jobs more interesting is something called job rotation. We move managers or non-managers around. The individual gets to complete more jobs. It increases the range of the jobs and also their perception of the variety and keeps them from being bored. We might also enlarge their jobs where we actually give them more tasks so they're not repetitively doing the same thing over and over again. It increases their range, but maybe not their depth. They just are able to do a lot of different jobs. Job enrichment involves creating more depth so that an employee might find more fulfillment, have more autonomy within the decisions of their job. And again, this applies to Hertzberg two-factor theory when we say, when we just pay people a regular rate and have a work environment that's safe, they're not particularly motivated. But when we give them more job enrichment or fulfillment of their needs, they tend to have more We might want to give them new learning opportunities, rearrange their scheduling, give them something unique, give them more control over resources, make them more accountable, give them a lot more feedback. The job characteristics model by Hackman and Oldman is a good model to consider if you're looking more at job, how the job and outcomes take place. So if we look at a job, we look at the characteristics, and we've been talking about this as we go along, where we look at the variety of the job, how many skills do they need, how much they identify with the task of the job, like this is something I do, this is what I'm trained for, that if they feel they're doing something important for the organization, like this organization couldn't exist without me, that there's more, that they have some autonomy, that they don't always have to ask permission to do something, and they get feedback when they've done a job appropriately or not. We also have a section of the psychological states around that job, so that the worker within skill, variety, identity experiences meaningfulness. Within autonomy, they experience a sense of responsibility. When they get feedback, they know they have knowledge of their results and their work activities, and then this could lead to higher outcomes such as that we measure in the organization, such as reduction in absenteeism and turnover. If we want to increase core dimensions of the job, we would combine tasks. We would give people whole pieces of work rather than just little, so they could see something from start to finish. We could allow discretion in terms of how they go about doing their work. We can have them pace themselves instead of putting them on time constraints, and we can make sure that they have plenty of opportunity to give and receive feedback within their job. In terms of some of the problems about job design in our fast-paced society, is it's very time-consuming and it could be costly. Unless lower-level needs are satisfied, people aren't even going to respond to opportunities to satisfy upper-level needs. So if you're trying to create growth opportunities and people are worried about losing their jobs, good luck. Job design may raise employees' expectations that they're going to get more pay or more this beyond what the organization is capable of delivering. And if we are involved in a union operation, some of these things aren't even allowed to be done unless you negotiate with the union. So when we do some job design, it may produce or may not produce different improvements for some time after the effort begins. In terms of the use of work teams, this has become very common in organizations. They don't always achieve high levels of productivity, cooperation, and success unless we apply some of the things we talked about in our chapter on effective team development. Researchers claim that good work team design does lead to better employee satisfaction, more effectiveness, and more productivity. Some of the characteristics when we have a team that we want to address is how can they manage themselves, how much participation is going on. Again, we were looking at referring back to that model of job design and capability, is we look at, is this interesting enough? Is there enough variety? Is it important enough? And does the team have an identity with that particular task? Another area that has come into looking at job design has to do with total quality management and job design. And more and more organizations want to have zero defects, and they term this total quality management, where they want to make important decisions about product quality and service, and it needs to be delivered at the highest level. We look at socio-technological theory around this, where we focus on the interaction between the technological demands and the social demands of the job. This needs to be compatible with TQM because it relates to demands of modern technology and self-motivation on work behavior. We really, in today's global environment, we need to incorporate more total quality management approaches in terms of our job design.